In the mountain town of Cedar Ridge, Colorado, everyone knew Tom Reyes as the handyman who couldn't catch a break. A single father scraping by on repair jobs, he became the town's latest source of gossip when he inherited his eccentric aunt's abandoned mine. The townsfolk shook their heads as Tom drained his savings to pay the back taxes on what they called Crazy Clara's hole in the ground. His neighbors whispered behind grocery store aisles about the poor man chasing fool's gold, while his 8-year-old daughter needed new shoes. The mine hadn't produced anything valuable in decades, its tunnels dark and forgotten. But when Tom and his daughter discovered a glint of gold in an unexplored shaft, it wasn't just any ordinary find, it was the entrance to something far more valuable than anyone could have imagined. What if the woman everyone dismissed as eccentric had actually found the discovery of a lifetime? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Tom Reyes' modest rental house, casting long shadows across the worn hardwood floors. At 42, his hands bore the calluses and small scars of a man who had spent 2 decades fixing what others couldn't or wouldn't repair themselves. The alarm clock's persistent buzz had awakened him at 5:30, same as every weekday for the past 3 years, ever since Sophie's mother had left them both behind for what she called a real future in Denver. Tom's work boots sat beside the front door, their leather cracked but still reliable, much like the man who wore them. His toolbox occupied the corner of the living room, organized with the precision of someone who understood that losing a screwdriver could mean losing a day's wages. The house smelled faintly of coffee and the sawdust that seemed to follow him home, no matter how thoroughly he cleaned up after each job. Sophie emerged from her bedroom, her dark hair tousled from sleep, wearing pajamas that were getting too small. At 8 years old, she possessed the kind of curious intelligence that made her father both proud and worried. She had inherited his steady hands and her mother's quick mind, a combination that often led to dismantled household items and ingenious solutions to problems Tom hadn't even noticed. "Morning, Dad," she said, settling into her chair at the small kitchen table. The furniture had come with the house, mismatched pieces that somehow created a sense of home through their very imperfection. "Morning, sweetheart. Sleep okay?" Tom poured milk over her cereal, noting that they were down to their last gallon. Another grocery run would be necessary soon, and the mathematics of his checking account made every purchase a careful calculation. "I dreamed about Aunt Clara again," Sophie said, stirring her cereal thoughtfully. "She was showing me something in a cave. There were sparkly rocks everywhere." Tom paused, his coffee mug halfway to his lips. Clara had been gone for 6 months now, but Sophie's dreams about her great-aunt had become more frequent since the inheritance. The old woman had always been kind to Sophie during their rare visits, treating her with a respect most adults reserved for their peers. "What kind of sparkly rocks?" Tom asked, settling into his own chair. "Different colors, blue and green and silver. She kept saying they were special, that they could help people." Sophie took a bite of cereal, her expression serious. "Do you think she's trying to tell us something?" Before Tom could answer, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Henderson Construction, his most reliable source of steady work. He answered on the second ring, his voice taking on the professional tone that had served him well in business. "Tom Reyes speaking." "Tom, it's Bill Henderson. Listen, I've got some bad news about the Riverside project." Tom's stomach tightened. The Riverside renovation was supposed to provide 3 weeks of steady income, enough to cover rent, groceries, and maybe even a small emergency fund. What kind of bad news? The client's having second thoughts. Word's gotten around about that mine you inherited, and frankly, people are starting to question your judgment. "I'm sorry, Tom, but I have to pull you from the project." The words hit Tom like a physical blow. He glanced at Sophie, who was watching his face with the perceptive concern of a child who had learned to read adult expressions for signs of trouble. "Bill, I've worked for you for 5 years. You know the quality of my work." "I do, and that's what makes this so hard. But business is business, and if clients don't trust you, I can't use you. Maybe this will all blow over once you sell that property and get back to normal." The line went dead, leaving Tom staring at his phone. Normal. As if there had ever been anything normal about struggling to raise a daughter alone while the town watched and whispered about every decision he made. Sophie reached across the table and placed her small hand over his. "Dad, are you okay?" Tom looked into his daughter's eyes, seeing not just concern, but also faith, the unwavering belief that her father could handle whatever came their way. It was a responsibility that both sustained and terrified him. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just some work stuff. Is it about the mine?" Tom had tried to shield Sophie from the worst of the town's gossip, but 8-year-olds had a way of hearing things adults thought they were protecting them from. "Some people don't understand why I kept it instead of selling it right away. But you had to keep it. Aunt Clara left it to you for a reason." The simple certainty in her voice made Tom's chest tighten. Sophie had never met an adult problem she couldn't solve with logic and determination, traits that would serve her well in life if he could just keep them afloat long enough for her to grow up. After breakfast, Tom dropped Sophie off at Cedar Ridge Elementary, watching her walk up the steps with the confidence of someone who believed the world was fundamentally fair. If only he could bottle that certainty for himself. The drive to the mine took 20 minutes through winding mountain roads that offered spectacular views of the Colorado Rockies. In different circumstances, Tom might have appreciated the beauty. Today, he was too focused on the approaching conversation with his neighbor, Mrs. Henderson Bill's mother, and the unofficial mayor of local opinion. Eleanor Henderson was 73 years old and had lived in Cedar Ridge her entire life. She had known Clara Reyes better than anyone, and if Tom was going to understand why his aunt had left him the mine, Mrs. Proms Henderson was his best hope for answers. Her house sat on a hill overlooking the valley, a neat Victorian with flower boxes that demonstrated the kind of attention to detail Tom admired. She answered the door, wearing a floral dress and an expression of polite concern. "Tom, dear, I heard about the job situation. I'm so sorry." "News travels fast in a small town," Tom said, trying to keep the bitterness from his voice. Come in. I've got coffee brewing." Her living room was a museum of Cedar Ridge history, filled with photographs and memorabilia that chronicled 8 decades of community life. Tom had always felt comfortable here, treated with the respect he rarely received elsewhere in town. "Mrs. Henderson, I need to ask you about Clara, about why she might have left me the mine." Eleanor poured coffee from a china service that probably cost more than Tom's monthly rent. "Clara was always fond of you, Tom. She used to say you had good hands and a good heart. But the mine hasn't produced anything in decades. Everyone thinks I'm chasing a fantasy." Everyone thought Clara was chasing a fantasy too toward the end. But she was a geology professor before she retired, you know. She understood rocks and minerals better than anyone in this valley. Tom had known about Clara's academic background, but he'd never considered how it might apply to her interest in the mine. What exactly was she looking for out there? Eleanor's expression grew thoughtful. "She never told me directly, but in her last few years, she became very interested in what she called the minerals of the future. She said the old-timers who worked that mine had no idea what they were sitting on." "What did she mean by that?" "I'm not sure, but she spent a lot of time reading scientific journals and corresponding with people from universities. She had boxes of research materials in her house before she passed." Tom felt a spark of hope. "What happened to those materials?" "I suppose they're still there. The house is part of the inheritance, isn't it?" Tom nodded, realizing he'd been so focused on the mine itself that he'd barely examined Clara's residence. "Would you mind if I took a look?" "Of course not. The key is under the flower pot by the back door, same as always." 20 minutes later, Tom stood in Clara's kitchen, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of a woman who had spent her life studying the earth beneath their feet. The house smelled of lavender and old books, a combination that somehow made him feel closer to understanding his aunt's motivations. Clara's study was a revelation. The walls were covered with geological maps, mineral samples, and photographs of rock formations. Her desk was organized with the precision of a scientist, covered with notebooks, correspondence, and technical papers that Tom couldn't begin to understand. But it was the leather-bound journal, lying open on the desk, that caught his attention. Clara's handwriting filled the pages, interspersed with sketches and diagrams that looked like maps of the mine's interior. On the open page, one phrase was underlined 3 times: "The vein that could light the world." Tom picked up the journal, feeling its weight in his hands. The entries dated back 5 years, chronicling Clara's growing excitement about something she had discovered in the mine's depths. Her words were scientific but passionate, describing geological formations and mineral compositions with the enthusiasm of someone who had stumbled upon something extraordinary. One entry, dated just 3 months before her death, was particularly intriguing. "The assay results confirm what I suspected. The concentrations are beyond anything I've seen in 40 years of fieldwork. If I'm right, this could change everything, not just for me, but for the entire renewable energy industry. I need to be careful about who I share this with. There are people who would do anything to control this kind of resource." Tom closed the journal, his mind racing. Whatever Clara had found, it was significant enough to make her cautious about sharing the information. The question was whether her discoveries were real or the product of an aging mind grasping for one last moment of relevance. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Dad, can we go to the mine after school? I want to see where Aunt Clara worked." Tom smiled despite his concerns. Sophie's enthusiasm for the mine was infectious, and her presence always made him feel more optimistic about their situation. Maybe together they could solve the mystery Clara had left behind. As he locked up the house and headed back to town, Tom carried the journal with him, its leather binding warm against his palm. For the first time since inheriting the mine, he felt like he might be on the right track. The townspeople could whisper all they wanted about his judgment. Clara had been a scientist, not a dreamer, and if she believed there was something valuable in that mine, then perhaps it was worth investigating. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the valley as Tom drove home, Clara's journal on the passenger seat beside him. Whatever secrets the mine held, he and Sophie would discover them together. After all, some treasures were worth fighting for, even if you had to dig through solid rock to find them. The loss of the Henderson job was only the beginning. By Wednesday morning, Tom's phone had gone silenter, silence that spoke louder than any conversation. Word traveled fast in Cedar Ridge, and apparently the consensus was that Tom Reyes had lost his mind, along with his inheritance. He sat at his kitchen table, calculator in hand, watching numbers that refused to add up favorably. Rent was due in 2 weeks, Sophie needed new winter clothes, and the utility company had already sent one warning notice. The mine's back taxes had consumed most of his emergency fund, leaving him with perhaps 3 weeks of financial runway before serious decisions would have to be made. Clara's journal lay open beside his coffee cup, its pages filled with technical language that might as well have been written in code. Phrases like rare earth concentrations and lithium-bearing pegmatites dotted the margins, accompanied by sketches that looked more like abstract art than mining diagrams. Sophie emerged from her bedroom, dressed for school but moving slowly. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she had inherited her father's tendency to worry about adult problems. "Dad, Katie's mom said I can't come to her birthday party on Saturday." Tom looked up from his calculations, his stomach sinking. "Did she say why?" "She said her parents don't want me around because we're going through a difficult time." Sophie's 8-year-old voice made air quotes with surprising accuracy. "What does that mean?" The question hit Tom harder than losing the construction job. Adults could judge his decisions all they wanted, but when their prejudice started affecting his daughter's social life, the stakes became personal. "It means some people don't understand the choices we've made," Tom said carefully. "About keeping the mine?" "About keeping the mine." Sophie climbed into a chair and reached for the journal. "Maybe if we could show them what Aunt Clara found, they'd understand." Tom watched his daughter flip through pages of geological terminology and mineral diagrams, her face serious with concentration. Where he saw incomprehensible science, she seemed to find patterns and connections that made intuitive sense. "Look at this," Sophie said, pointing to a hand-drawn map of the mine's tunnel system. Aunt Clara marked all these spots with stars, and here, she flipped to another page. She wrote promising samples next to coordinates. Tom leaned closer, studying his aunt's careful notations. The map showed areas of the mine he had never explored, marked with symbols that suggested Clara had been methodical in her investigation. If she had been systematically sampling different areas, there might be physical evidence of her discoveries still waiting to be found. The doorbell interrupted his thoughts. Through the front window, Tom could see a black sedan parked in his driveway, expensive-looking, with government plates. His first thought was taxis. His second was child services, and neither possibility improved his mood. The man at the door wore a suit that cost more than Tom's monthly income and carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. He was perhaps 50, with silver hair and the kind of tan that came from golf courses rather than manual labor. "Mr. Reyes, Marcus Webb, Titan Industries. I wonder if we might have a conversation about your recent inheritance." Tom glanced back at Sophie, who was watching the interaction with sharp attention. "What kind of conversation?" "The profitable kind, I hope. May I come in?" Against his better judgment, Tom stepped aside. Webb entered with the assessing gaze of someone who made quick evaluations of people and their weaknesses. His eyes took in the modest furnishings, the calculator on the table, and the stack of unpaid bills beside Tom's coffee cup. "Charming place," Webb said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Mr. Reyes, I'll get straight to the point. Titan Industries is prepared to offer you $200,000 for the mine property, cash, no contingencies, closing within 2 weeks. The number made Tom's breath catch. 200,000 would solve every immediate problem and provide security for Sophie's future. It was more money than he had ever imagined having at one time. "That's generous," Tom said carefully, "but I'm not sure I'm ready to sell." Webb's smile remained fixed, but somehow became less warm. "Mr. Reyes, I've done my research. You're a skilled craftsman, but business clearly isn't your strength. The mine hasn't produced anything valuable in decades. You're chasing a fantasy, while your daughter suffers the consequences." The comment about Sophie crossed a line Tom hadn't realized existed. "My daughter is fine." "Is she? I understand she's already facing social difficulties because of your decision to keep the property. How much worse will it get when you can't make rent? When she has to change schools because you can't afford to live here anymore?" Tom felt heat rising in his chest, but forced himself to remain calm. "How do you know about my finances?" "Small towns talk, Mr. Reyes. Everyone knows about your recent job troubles. Everyone knows you drained your savings for taxes on worthless land. The question is, how long will you let pride prevent you from making the smart choice?" From the kitchen table, Sophie spoke up. "It's not worthless. Aunt Clara found something important." Webb's attention shifted to her with the precision of a predator identifying potential prey. "And what exactly did your great-aunt find, sweetheart?" "Rocks that could help people," Sophie said, her voice steady despite Webb's intimidating presence. "Special minerals for making batteries and things." Webb's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes' interest, or perhaps recognition. "Is that so? Well, children do have wonderful imaginations." Tom stepped between Webb and Sophie, his protective instincts overriding his caution. "I think this conversation is over." "Of course. But Mr. Reyes, consider this. Titan Industries has the resources to properly develop any legitimate mineral deposits. We have geologists, environmental specialists, and the capital to do things right. What do you have? A toolbox and good intentions?" Webb reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card. "The offer stands for 72 hours. After that, market conditions might require us to reassess the property's value." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. After Webb left, Tom found himself staring at the business card, its elegant design somehow making his own circumstances feel even more precarious. "Dad, "We're not selling, right?" Sophie's voice carried a note of worry. Tom looked at his daughter, seeing in her face the absolute trust that had sustained him through 3 years of single parenthood. "We're not selling," he said, surprised by the firmness in his own voice. That afternoon, while Sophie was at school, Tom drove to the mine with Clara's journal and a growing sense of urgency. Webb's visit had clarified something important. The mine wasn't just a burden or an opportunity, it was the center of a larger conflict he didn't yet understand. The property consisted of 37 acres of rocky terrain, dominated by the original mine entrance and scattered with the remnants of early 20th century mining equipment. Clara had maintained a small trailer on the site, which Tom had assumed was for storing tools. Now he wondered if it might contain additional research materials. The trailer was unlocked, its interior organized with the same scientific precision he had found in Clara's house. Maps covered the walls, marked with different colored pins and connected by string like a detective's investigation board. A large table held rock samples arranged in careful rows, each labeled with coordinates and dates. But it was the filing cabinet in the corner that provided the real revelation. The top drawer contained correspondence with geological consultants, university researchers, and mineral assay laboratories. Clara hadn't been working à la niche, had been building a network of professional validation for her discoveries. One letter, dated 18 months earlier, was from Dr. Elena Vasquez at the Colorado School of Mines. Tom read it twice, barely believing the technical language. Preliminary analysis confirms exceptional concentrations of lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements. Further investigation strongly recommended. Potential commercial value significant. Another document, stamped Confidential Geological Survey, contained charts and graphs that meant nothing to Tom, but were clearly important enough for Clara to keep in a locked file. The survey was signed by Dr. Vasquez and dated just 6 months before Clara's death. Tom's hands trembled as he read through more correspondence. Clara hadn't been a lonely old woman chasing fantasia, had been conducting legitimate scientific research with credentialed professionals. The mine contained something valuable enough to attract the attention of university geologists. As he photographed the documents with his phone, Tom began to understand why Webb had appeared so quickly after news of the inheritance became public. Titan Industries wasn't making a charitable offer to help a struggling single father. They were trying to acquire a potentially valuable resource before Tom realized what he owned. The setting sun painted the mountain peaks orange and red as Tom locked up the trailer and prepared to leave. For the first time since inheriting the mine, he felt like he was moving toward answers rather than away from them. Clara had left him more than property. She had left him a mystery that was becoming more intriguing with each discovery. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Dad, when you pick me up, can we stop at the library? I want to look up things about rocks and minerals." Tom smiled, pocketing the phone. His daughter's curiosity had always been one of her greatest strengths, and now it might become their greatest asset. Together, they would uncover the truth about Clara's discoveries. The question was whether they could do it before Webb and Titan Industries decided to take more aggressive action. As Tom drove down the mountain road, Clara's geological survey report on the passenger seat, he realized that keeping the mine was no longer just about financial security or family loyalty. It was about proving that sometimes the people everyone dismisses as foolish are actually the only ones wise enough to see what really matters. The town of Cedar Ridge spread below him in the gathering darkness, its lights twinkling like the mineral samples in Clara's trailer. Somewhere in those tunnels lay answers that could change everything. The question was whether Tom had the courage to dig deep enough to find them. Saturday morning arrived with the crisp clarity that only Colorado autumn could provide. Tom stood in his garage, examining the mining equipment Clara had left behind, with new appreciation for its sophisticated modifications. What he had initially dismissed as an old woman's tinkering now revealed itself as the careful work of someone who understood exactly what she was looking for. The headlamp systems had been upgraded with LED technology and battery packs that would last hours longer than standard equipment. The rock hammers bore Clara's personal modifications-weighted handles and specialized heads designed for extracting specific types of samples. Most telling was the portable mineral testing kit, complete with chemical reagents and a small electronic device Tom didn't recognize. Sophie emerged from the house wearing her adventure clothes, sturdy jeans, hiking boots, and a jacket with multiple pockets for collecting interesting discoveries. At 8 years old, she approached their weekend mine expeditions with the same systematic curiosity that had made Clara a respected geologist. "Did you bring the journal?" Sophie asked, shouldering her small backpack. Tom patted his jacket pocket. "Right here. And I printed copies of those survey maps from the trailer." The drive to the mine had become a weekly ritual, but today felt different. Armed with Clara's research and professional validation from Dr. Vasquez, Tom no longer felt like he was chasing fantasies. He was following a scientific investigation that had been interrupted by Clara's death. The mine entrance yawned before them, a portal into the mountain that had been carved by ambitious men over a century ago. Clara's modifications were evident here. Touche had installed modern safety equipment and lighting systems that made exploration safer and more systematic. "Where should we start today?" Sophie asked, consulting the hand-drawn map from Clara's journal. Tom studied the coordinates Clara had marked as promising sampling sites. Many were in areas he had never explored, tunnels that branched off from the main shaft into the mountain's depths. "How about this section here?" Clara marked it with 3 stars. They made their way into the mine, their headlamps cutting through darkness that felt ancient and expectant. The tunnels smelled of mineral-rich rock and the lingering traces of Clara's scientific work. Tom found himself moving with increasing confidence, guided by his aunt's careful mapping and his own growing familiarity with the underground landscape. Sophie stopped at a section where the tunnel walls showed different coloration streaks of blue and green that stood out against the predominant grey rock. "Dad, look at this. These are the colors from my dreams about Aunt Clara." Tom examined the mineral deposits Sophie had spotted, comparing them to photographs in Clara's research files. The coloration suggested copper compounds, but Clara's notes indicated these were secondary indicators of more valuable deposits deeper in the rock formation. "Good eye, sweetheart. Clara's notes say these surface minerals point to richer veins below." Using Clara's modified tools, Tom carefully extracted samples from the colorful streaks. The rock came away in chunks that revealed crystalline structures, unlike anything he had seen in conventional construction materials. Even to his untrained eye, these samples looked special too organized and pure to be common minerals. Sophie's backpack contained the portable testing kit Clara had assembled. Following instructions from the research files, Tom mixed small rock fragments with chemical solutions that changed color based on mineral content. The results matched Clara's documented findings, positive reactions for elements he couldn't pronounce, but that seemed to excite university geologists. "What do the colors mean?" Sophie asked, watching the chemical reactions with fascination. According to Clara's notes, they indicate rare metals that are used in advanced technology, batteries for electric cars, computer components, things like that. "So the rocks really could help people?" Tom nodded, beginning to understand the scope of Clara's discovery. "If there's enough of them, yes. These minerals are essential for clean energy technology." They spent the morning systematically sampling different areas marked in Clara's journal. Each location yielded similar results, consistent indicators of valuable mineral deposits that suggested a significant resource rather than isolated pockets of ore. By noon, they had collected samples from 6 different sites, all showing promising test results. Tom's excitement was tempered by growing awareness of the implications. If Clara's findings were accurate, he owned mineral rights to deposits worth potentially millions of dollars. As they prepared to leave the mine, Sophie made another discovery that stopped Tom in his tracks. In a narrow passage marked with Clara's highest priority symbols, she found equipment he hadn't noticed before. A small drilling apparatus with rock samples already extracted and labeled. "Dad, look! Aunt Clara was drilling core samples here. Tom examined the drilling site, noting the professional precision of Clara's work. The core samples were stored in labeled containers with dates from just weeks before her death. She had been actively investigating this specific location, suggesting it held particular promise. The containers held rock cores that showed clear mineral veining streaks of metallic deposits running through the stone, like nature's own electrical wiring. Even Tom's untrained eye could see that these samples were different from the surface indicators they had been testing. "We need to get these properly analyzed," Tom said, carefully packing the core samples. Back at home, Sophie spread their morning's discoveries across the kitchen table like treasures from a pirate expedition. The mineral samples caught the afternoon light, revealing complexity and beauty that explained Clara's passion for geology. Tom's phone rang as they were cataloging their finds. The caller ID showed a local number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Reyes, this is Janet Morrison from Cedar Ridge Elementary. I need to speak with you about Sophie." Tom's stomach clenched. "Is she hurt?" "No, nothing like that, but there's been an incident I think you should know about." Apparently, Sophie had brought some of Clara's mineral samples to school for show and tell, enthusiastically explaining her great-aunt's research to her second-grade class. The presentation had gone well until word reached the principal's office that Tom Reyes's daughter was promoting dangerous mining activities. "The concern," Mrs. Morrison explained delicately, "is that some parents feel Sophie's presentation might encourage other children to explore unsafe areas or handle unknown rocks." Tom closed his eyes, recognizing Webb's influence in the complaint. "Mrs. Morrison, Sophie was sharing legitimate geological samples from a scientific investigation. There's nothing dangerous about education." "I understand your position, Mr. Reyes, but given the community's concerns about the mine situation, we think it would be best if Sophie chose different topics for future presentations." After ending the call, Tom found Sophie in her room, carefully arranging mineral samples on her desk with the methodical precision she had inherited from both sides of her family. "Dad, why are people afraid of rocks?" The question was so innocent that Tom had to sit down on her bed before answering. "They're not afraid of the rocks, sweetheart. They're afraid of change." "But if the rocks can help make clean energy, isn't change good?" Tom looked at his daughter, seeing in her clear logic the kind of thinking that had driven Clara's research. Sometimes adults have trouble seeing past their fears to recognize opportunities. That evening, Tom spread Clara's research across his kitchen table, studying geological surveys and mineral analyses with growing comprehension. The technical language was becoming familiar, and the implications were staggering. Clara hadn't just found valuable minerals, she had identified a resource that could contribute significantly to America's transition to renewable energy. His laptop showed emails from 3 different geological consulting firms, all responding to inquiries he had sent using Dr. Vasquez's contact information. Each confirmed that Clara's preliminary findings warranted serious investigation and potential development. But the most important email came from Dr. Vasquez herself. "Mr. Reyes, I was sorry to hear about Clara's passing. She was conducting important work, and I'd be happy to discuss her findings with you. The minerals she identified could be extremely valuable, both economically and environmentally. We should talk soon." Tom stared at the screen, realizing that Clara's scientific network was still active and willing to help. For the first time since inheriting the mine, he didn't feel alone in understanding its potential. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Reyes, my client's offer expires Monday. New market conditions may not be as favorable. Monsieur Webb." Tom deleted the message without responding. Webb's threats felt less intimidating now that Tom understood what he was really fighting for. Clara hadn't left him a burden, she had left him a responsibility to see her work completed and her discoveries used for their intended purpose. Sophie appeared in the doorway wearing her pajamas, clutching a small mineral sample that caught the kitchen light like captured starfire. "Dad, I think I understand why Aunt Clara left you the mine." "Why's that, sweetheart?" Because you're the kind of person who fixes things. And maybe the mine isn't broken, maybe it just needed the right person to help it shine. Tom smiled, pulling his daughter into a hug that smelled of shampoo and childhood innocence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight he felt grounded by the knowledge that Clara's faith in him had been justified. The mine held treasures worth fighting for, and he was finally ready to prove that some inheritances were too valuable to sell. Monday morning brought unexpected visitors to Tom's front door. Sarah Reyes stood on his porch, wearing her lawyer clothes and the expression she reserved for serious conversations about Sophie's welfare. Behind her lurked a man Tom didn't recognize, middle-aged, expensive suit, carrying a briefcase that suggested official business. "Tom, we need to talk," Sarah said without preamble. "This is David Chen, my attorney." Tom's coffee grew cold as he processed the implications. Sarah lived in Denver now, pursuing what she called real opportunities with a software executive who drove a Tesla and viewed Tom's blue-collar life as quaint at best. Her unannounced visits usually meant Sophie's birthday or Christmas, never random Monday mornings. "What's this about, Sarah?" "It's about our daughter's welfare. I've been hearing things about this mine situation, and frankly, I'm concerned about the environment you're creating for Sophie." Tom glanced through the front window, where Sophie was waiting for the school bus with her backpack full of books and a pocket full of mineral samples she wasn't supposed to share. "The environment I'm creating is called a home." Chen stepped forward with the smooth confidence of someone paid to handle difficult conversations. "Mr. Reyes, we're not here to attack your parenting. We're here because Sophie's current situation raises legitimate concerns about stability and safety." "What concerns?" Sarah's voice carried the patient tone she used when explaining obvious things to people she considered slow. "Tom, you drained your savings for taxes on worthless land. You've lost major contracts because of your obsession with this mine. Sophie's facing social problems at school because of your decisions. Sophie's facing social problems because adults are teaching their children to judge people based on gossip rather than character." "That's exactly the kind of thinking that worries me," Sarah said. "You're so focused on proving everyone wrong that you can't see how your choices are affecting our daughter." Chen opened his briefcase and withdrew a legal document that Tom recognized without reading. "Custody modification papers. Mr. Reyes, we're prepared to offer a reasonable transition. Temporary custody with Ms. Reyes while you resolve your financial situation. Once you're stable again, we can discuss expanded visitation." The words hit Tom like a physical blow. Sarah wasn't just criticizing his choices, he was trying to take Sophie away from him. "You can't be serious." "Tom, I make 6 figures in Denver. Sophie could attend private school, live in a safe neighborhood, have opportunities you can't provide. This isn't about hurting you, it's about giving our daughter the best possible future." Tom looked at his ex-wife, seeing in her face the same impatience that had driven her away 3 years ago. Sarah had always believed that love could be measured in annual income and square footage, that security meant eliminating risk rather than teaching children to navigate uncertainty with courage. "Sophie is happy here." "Is she? Really? When she can't go to birthday parties because other parents question your judgment, when she has to defend your decisions to her classmates, when she worries about money because she hears you on the phone with creditors?" The accusations stung because they contained fragments of truth. Sophie did worry about adult problems, and she had faced social difficulties because of his choices. But Sarah's solution, removing Sophie from the only stable home she had known, seemed designed to protect the mother's peace of mind rather than the daughter's well-being. "I'm not signing anything," Tom said firmly. Chen's expression didn't change. "Mr. Reyes, consider your position carefully. Court proceedings can be expensive and emotionally difficult for everyone, especially children. A voluntary agreement would be much simpler." "For who?" "For Sophie. Children adjust better to transitions when their parents cooperate rather than fight." After Sarah and Chen left, Tom sat in his kitchen, staring at legal papers that reduced his relationship with Sophie to visitation schedules and financial assessments. The mine's potential value meant nothing if he lost his daughter while trying to prove its worth. His phone rang, offering welcome distraction from custody concerns. Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice carried the excitement of someone who had spent her career waiting for discoveries like Clara's. "Mr. Reyes, I've reviewed the photographs you sent of Clara's core samples. The mineral concentrations are extraordinary, some of the highest I've seen outside of major commercial operations." Tom gripped the phone tighter. "How extraordinary?" "The lithium content alone would be commercially viable, but combined with the rare earth concentrations, you're looking at a potentially world-class deposit." Clara's work was meticulous, and her findings appear to be conservative estimates rather than optimistic projections. Conservative estimates of what? Based on preliminary analysis, the accessible portions of your mine could contain minerals worth tens of millions of dollars. If the deposits extend as deeply as Clara's geological surveys suggest, we might be talking about hundreds of millions. The number made Tom's vision blur. Hundreds of millions of dollars could solve every problem he faced and provide security for Sophie's entire future. But it also explained why Webb had appeared so quickly with buyout offers. "Dr. Vasquez, I need to ask you something confidential. Have you been contacted by anyone from Titan Industries?" The pause that followed told Tom everything he needed to know. "Mr. Reyes, I think we should meet in person. There are things about Clara's research that require careful discussion." They arranged to meet that afternoon at a coffee shop in Boulder, far enough from Cedar Ridge to avoid local attention. Tom spent the morning reviewing Clara's encrypted coordinate system, trying to decode her mapping symbols with Sophie's intuitive help. "Look at this pattern," Sophie said, pointing to recurring symbols in Clara's journal. She used different shapes for different types of minerals. Stars for the really special stuff, circles for good finds, and triangles for areas that need more investigation. Tom studied his daughter's analysis, impressed by her ability to recognize patterns that had escaped his notice. "How did you figure that out?" "It's like a secret code. Aunt Clara was protecting her discoveries by making them hard for other people to understand." The insight proved accurate when Tom applied Sophie's decoding to Clara's maps. The star-marked locations corresponded exactly with areas where Dr. Vasquez had recommended focused investigation. Clara had been systematic in protecting information that could attract unwanted attention. Dr. Vasquez turned out to be a woman in her 50s with graying hair and the focused intensity of someone who had spent decades studying things most people took for granted. She arrived at the coffee shop carrying a briefcase and wearing the expression of someone with important secrets to share. "Mr. Reyes, thank you for coming. Clara spoke about you often. She was very proud of your craftsmanship and your devotion to Sophie. She never mentioned working with university researchers." Clara was cautious about publicity, especially after she realized the significance of her findings. "The minerals in your mine aren't just valuable, they're strategically important for American energy independence." Dr. Vasquez opened her briefcase and withdrew geological surveys that made Clara's personal research look preliminary by comparison. Professional analysis confirmed what Clara had suspected. The mine contained one of the largest accessible deposits of critical minerals in the western United States. "This is why Titan Industries contacted you so quickly," Dr. Vasquez explained. "They've been monitoring geological research in this region, looking for exactly this type of resource." "How would they know about Clara's work?" "Corporate intelligence. They track university research, patent applications, geological surveys, anything that might indicate valuable mineral discoveries." Clara was smart to keep her work private, but someone must have leaked information about her findings. Tom felt a chill that had nothing to do with autumn weather. What kind of someone? Someone with access to confidential research. Someone who understood the value of what Clara had found. Dr. Vasquez's explanation painted a picture of corporate competition that made Webb's buyout offers seem less generous and more predatory. Titan Industries didn't want to develop the mine, they wanted to control it, preventing competitors from accessing minerals essential for renewable energy technology. Dr. Vasquez, if these deposits are as valuable as you say, why did Clara keep working alone? Why didn't she partner with a major company for development? Because Clara believed in responsible stewardship. She wanted to ensure that any mining operation would benefit the local community rather than just corporate shareholders. She was developing extraction methods that would minimize environmental impact while maximizing long-term sustainability. The conversation lasted 2 hours, covering technical details that transformed Tom's understanding of his inheritance. Clara hadn't just found valuable minerals, she had identified a resource that could contribute significantly to America's energy future while providing sustainable economic development for Cedar Ridge. As Dr. Vasquez prepared to leave, she handed Tom a sealed envelope. "Clara asked me to give you this if anything happened to her. She was worried about corporate pressure and wanted you to understand the full scope of what she had discovered." Tom opened the envelope in his truck, reading Clara's final letter with growing amazement. His aunt had been more than a retired geology professor. She had been a visionary who understood that the mine's true value lay not just in its mineral wealth, but in its potential to demonstrate that resource extraction could benefit communities rather than exploit them. The letter's final paragraph made Tom's hands tremble. "Tom, I'm leaving you this responsibility because you understand that real wealth comes from building something lasting rather than extracting maximum profit. The mine contains treasures that could change everything for Sophie's generation, but only if it's developed with wisdom rather than greed. Trust your instincts, protect your daughter, and remember that the most valuable inheritance isn't money, it's the chance to make the world better than you found it." As Tom drove home through mountain roads that had become familiar over the past weeks, Clara's letter on the passenger seat beside him, he realized that his aunt had given him more than property or mineral rights. She had given him a mission that could provide meaning and purpose for the rest of his life. The question was whether he could complete that mission while protecting Sophie from the consequences of fighting people with more money and fewer scruples than he possessed. The document Dr. Vasquez had given Tom changed everything he thought he knew about Clara's work. Hidden within her geological surveys was a partnership agreement dated 2 years before her death, a formal collaboration between Clara Reyes and Dr. Elena Vasquez for comprehensive mineral assessment and sustainable extraction planning of the Cedar Ridge property. Tom read the agreement twice, struggling to understand its legal implications. Clara hadn't been working alone in her final years. She had been part of a legitimate scientific partnership with one of Colorado's most respected mining geologists. The document established intellectual property rights, revenue sharing arrangements, and environmental protection protocols that suggested Clara had been planning commercial development all along. More importantly, the agreement remained legally binding. Dr. Vasquez retained rights to Clara's research and a percentage of any future mining revenue. Tom wasn't just inheriting property, he was inheriting an active business partnership with someone who understood both the mine's potential and the challenges of developing it responsibly. His phone rang as he was studying the partnership details. Jake Martinez's voice carried uncharacteristic excitement. "Tom, you need to get down to Murphy's Bar. There's something you need to hear." Jake had been Tom's closest friend since high school, one of the few people in Cedar Ridge who had supported his decision to keep the mine. A mechanic by trade and philosopher by inclination, Jake possessed the kind of practical wisdom that cut through complications to identify what really mattered. Murphy's Bar occupied the same corner it had claimed for 60 years, serving as Cedar Ridge's unofficial town hall where important conversations happened over beer and honest opinions. Tom found Jake at a back table, accompanied by 3 men. Tom recognized, but had never considered allies: Pete Kowalski from the hardware store, Mike Chen, who ran the local garage, and surprisingly, Bill Henderson. "Sit down," Jake said, gesturing to an empty chair. "We've been talking about your situation." Tom remained standing, wary of group conversations that began with careful preparation. "What situation is that?" Bill Henderson spoke first, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had employed half the town at various times. "Tom, I owe you an apology. I let gossip influence my business decisions, and that was wrong. The Riverside Project. Forget the Riverside Project. I've got bigger work coming up, and I need skilled people I can trust. The question is whether you're interested." Pete Kowalski leaned forward, his weathered hands wrapped around a beer bottle. "Tom, we've been doing some research of our own. That mine of yours might be more important than any of us realized." The conversation that followed revealed a network of local investigation that Tom hadn't suspected. Pete had been quietly researching mineral prices and market demand for rare earth elements. Mike had been tracking corporate activity in the region, noting increased geological surveys and land acquisition attempts. Bill had been following county records, discovering that Titan Industries had been systematically purchasing mineral rights throughout the valley. "The pattern is clear," Jake explained. "Titan isn't just interested in your mine, they're trying to control the entire region's mineral resources. Your property is the key piece they need to monopolize everything." Tom sat down heavily, processing implications that extended far beyond his personal financial problems. "So this isn't really about helping a struggling single father?" "Hell no," Mike said bluntly. "This is about a corporation trying to corner the market on minerals that are essential for renewable energy. If they succeed, they'll control pricing for the entire industry." Bill Henderson's expression was grim. "Tom, I've been in construction for 30 years. I've seen what happens when outside companies take control of local resources. They extract maximum profit and leave communities with environmental damage and no economic benefits." The revelation transformed Tom's understanding of his conflict with Webb and Titan Industries. He wasn't just fighting for his own financial security, he was fighting for his community's economic independence and environmental future. "What are you suggesting?" Tom asked. "Partnership," Jake said simply. "Local development by local people for local benefit. We pool our resources, expertise, and political connections to develop the mine responsibly." Pete spread a hand-drawn map across the table, showing property lines and mineral rights throughout the valley. "Tom, your mine is the headwaters. If we can develop it as a community resource rather than a corporate extraction site, we set the precedent for everything else." The proposal was ambitious and risky. Jake's mechanical expertise could maintain mining equipment. Pete's retail connections could handle supply and logistics. Mike's automotive background included heavy machinery operation. Bill's construction experience encompassed project management and regulatory compliance. "What about financing?" Tom asked. "Even if we have the expertise, development costs could be enormous." "That's where Dr. Vasquez comes in," Bill said. "I've been researching university partnerships for sustainable mining projects. There's federal grant money available for demonstration projects that prove responsible extraction methods." Tom's mind raced through possibilities and problems. A community partnership could provide the human resources and local knowledge necessary for sustainable development. But it would also multiply the number of people at risk if Titan Industries decided to play hardball. "There's something else," Jake said, lowering his voice. "My cousin works for the county assessor's office. Titan has been quietly challenging property valuations and mineral rights throughout the valley. They're not just making offers, they're preparing legal challenges." The news hit Tom like ice water. Corporate buyouts were one thing, but legal warfare was entirely different. Fighting a major corporation in court required resources and expertise that a small-town handyman couldn't possibly afford. What kind of legal challenges? Claiming that original mineral rights weren't properly filed, that environmental regulations make mining impossible, that tax assessments were fraudulent. Basically, they're trying to create legal grounds to force sales at reduced prices. Mike Chen nodded grimly. "Tom, they're not just targeting you. They've got lawyers looking at every property in the valley that might contain valuable minerals. This is a systematic campaign to control the entire region." Tom felt the weight of responsibility multiplying. It wasn't just about his own fight anymore. It was about protecting his neighbors from corporate manipulation designed to steal their heritage and their future. "What do you need from me?" Tom asked. "Partnership," Bill said. "Legal partnership that establishes community ownership and development rights. If we're all invested in the mine's success, we're all committed to protecting it." Jake pushed a business card across the table. "Tom, this is my lawyer, specializes in small business partnerships and mineral rights. She says we can structure this as a cooperative that protects everyone's interests while maintaining your primary ownership." The conversation continued for another hour, covering details that transformed Tom's understanding of his situation. The mine wasn't just his inheritance, it was his community's opportunity to prove that resource development could benefit local people rather than distant shareholders. As the meeting broke up, Bill Henderson pulled Tom aside. "Tom, I want you to know that losing that contract wasn't about your work quality. It was about fear of change, fear of being wrong about you, fear of standing up to corporate pressure. A lot of us are done being afraid." Tom drove home through streets that looked the same but felt different. The houses and businesses of Cedar Ridge suddenly seemed more fragile, more vulnerable to forces beyond their control. But they also seemed more connected, more willing to fight for what mattered. Sophie was waiting at the kitchen table, her homework spread across the surface alongside mineral samples that caught the afternoon light. Her presence reminded Tom that whatever decisions he made would affect her future more than his own. "Dad," Mrs. Morrison called, "she wants to meet with you tomorrow about my school situation." Tom's stomach tightened. "What kind of school situation?" "Some parents are worried that I'm becoming too interested in mining and rocks. They think it's not appropriate for a girl my age." The comment revealed the deep-seated prejudices that Tom had been fighting his entire life. People who thought that curiosity and scientific interest were somehow dangerous for children, especially girls who were supposed to focus on more appropriate subjects. "Sophie, what do you think about that?" "I think some adults are scared of things they don't understand, but Aunt Clara wasn't scared, and she taught me that learning about the world is always good." Tom hugged his daughter, feeling the strength that came from knowing he was fighting for something larger than his own interests. Clara had left him more than property. She had left him a mission to prove that education, curiosity, and community cooperation could overcome fear and corporate manipulation. That evening, Tom spread Clara's research across his kitchen table alongside the partnership documents Jake had provided. The legal framework for community development was complex but achievable. More importantly, it offered a path forward that honored Clara's vision while protecting Sophie's future. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Vasquez. "Mr. Reyes, I've been contacted by Titan Industries about selling my research rights. We need to discuss this immediately." Tom stared at the message, realizing that Webb's campaign was expanding beyond property acquisition to include the scientific foundation for development. If Titan could purchase Dr. Vasquez's partnership rights, they could potentially control the mine's development regardless of Tom's ownership. He called Dr. Vasquez immediately, reaching her at her university office. "Dr. Vasquez, please tell me you didn't agree to sell." "Of course not. But Tom, their offer was substantial enough to fund my research for the next decade. They're not just trying to buy the mine, they're trying to buy the expertise necessary to develop it." "What did you tell them?" "I told them that my partnership with Clara was about more than money. But Tom, you need to understand the pressure they're applying. This isn't just about your property anymore. It's about controlling the entire future of sustainable mining in this region." The conversation lasted an hour, covering technical details and legal implications that made Tom's head spin. But the core message was clear. Titan Industries was escalating their campaign beyond simple buyout offers to comprehensive resource control. After hanging up, Tom sat in his kitchen, surrounded by evidence of Clara's vision and the community support necessary to achieve it. The mine contained treasures that could change everything for Cedar Ridge, but only if local people had the courage to fight for their own future. Sophie appeared in the doorway wearing her pajamas, carrying a mineral sample that reflected the kitchen light like captured hope. "Dad, I've been thinking about what those parents said about girls and mining." "What about it?" "Aunt Clara was a girl once, and she became a scientist who discovered amazing things. Maybe the problem isn't that girls shouldn't be interested in rocks. Maybe the problem is that some adults have forgotten how to be curious about the world." Tom smiled, pulling his daughter close. "Sophie, you're absolutely right. And tomorrow, we're going to start showing people that curiosity is always worth protecting." The meeting with Mrs. Morrison took place in the principal's office at Cedar Ridge Elementary, a room that smelled of industrial disinfectant and carried the weight of 1,000 difficult conversations. Tom sat across from the principal's desk, flanked by two parents he recognized from school events, but had never spoken with directly. Mrs. Morrison was a woman in her 50s who had dedicated her career to education and possessed the diplomatic skills necessary to navigate small-town politics. Her expression suggested she was as uncomfortable with this meeting as Tom was. "Mr. Reyes, thank you for coming. We're here to discuss Sophie's recent presentations about geology and mining." Tom kept his voice steady. "What about them?" The male parent, whose name Tom couldn't remember, leaned forward aggressively. "Mr. Reyes, your daughter has been showing potentially dangerous rock samples to other children. She's been talking about exploring abandoned mines and handling unknown chemicals. She's been sharing legitimate geological samples from a supervised scientific investigation." "That's exactly the problem," the female parent interjected. "Children shouldn't be involved in mining activities. It's dangerous, and frankly, it's not appropriate for a girl her age." Tom felt heat rising in his chest, but forced himself to remain calm. "Mrs. Morrison, Sophie is sharing her curiosity about natural science. Since when is education considered inappropriate?" "It's not about education," the male parent said. "It's about responsibility. Your obsession with that mine is affecting other children. They're asking questions about minerals and wanting to explore caves. One child brought a rock hammer to school." Mrs. Morrison raised her hand to interrupt the escalating tension. "Mr. Reyes, the concern is about safety and appropriate boundaries. While we support Sophie's academic interests, we need to ensure that school presentations don't encourage risky behavior." "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "We'd like Sophie to choose different topics for future presentations. Perhaps something more traditional: art, literature, community helpers." Tom looked at each adult in turn, seeing in their faces the same fear of change that had driven Clara to work in secrecy. "You're asking me to discourage my daughter's scientific curiosity because it makes other adults uncomfortable. We're asking you to consider the broader implications of your choices," the female parent said. "Your daughter is bright, but she's also impressionable. This mining obsession isn't healthy for her development. My daughter's interest in geology isn't an obsession, it's education. She's learning about the natural world, developing critical thinking skills, and following in the footsteps of her great-aunt, who was a respected scientist." The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, but the outcome was predetermined. Sophie would be encouraged to explore other interests, and Tom would be expected to support the school's educational priorities. The polite language couldn't disguise the underlying message: conform or face consequences. As Tom left the school, he realized that Webb's influence extended beyond direct business pressure to community institutions. The campaign to force him to sell wasn't just about financial manipulation, it was about social isolation designed to make his position untenable. That afternoon, Tom met with Jake's lawyer, Sandra Kim, a woman in her 40s who specialized in small business partnerships and mineral rights law. Her office was cluttered with case files and legal texts, but her manner was direct and reassuring. "Mr. Reyes, I've reviewed Clara's partnership agreement with Dr. Vasquez. It's a solid document that establishes clear rights and responsibilities. More importantly, it provides a legal framework for community development that could protect you from corporate pressure." "How?" "By establishing the mine as a community resource rather than individual property. If multiple local stakeholders have legal interests in the development, it becomes much harder for a corporation to force a sale or manipulate the process. Sandra spread partnership documents across her desk, explaining legal structures that could protect community interests while maintaining Tom's primary ownership. The arrangement was complex but achievable, requiring investments from local partners that would give them legal standing to fight corporate challenges. The key, Sandra explained, is timing. Once Titan Industries realizes you're organizing community resistance, they'll escalate their pressure. We need to have legal protections in place before they make their next move. Tom's phone rang as they were discussing implementation details. Dr. Vasquez's voice carried urgency that made him excuse himself from the legal meeting. "Tom, we have a problem. I've been contacted by someone claiming to represent your interest, man named Webb, who says you're ready to sell your partnership rights along with the property." Tom's blood ran cold. "Dr. Vasquez, I never authorized anyone to negotiate on my behalf." "I didn't think so, but Tom, he had detailed information about our partnership agreement and your financial situation. Someone is providing him with confidential information." The implications were staggering. Webb wasn't just applying external pressure, he had access to inside information about Tom's legal and financial situation. Someone in Cedar Ridge was feeding intelligence to Titan Industries. "Dr. Vasquez, what exactly did Webb tell you?" "He claimed that you're facing custody challenges and need immediate liquidity. He offered to purchase my partnership rights for fair market value, saying it would simplify your situation." Tom closed his eyes, understanding Webb's strategy. By eliminating Dr. Vasquez's partnership, Titan could gain control of Clara's research while making Tom's position legally untenable. It was a sophisticated attack on multiple fronts. "I'm not selling, and I hope you're not either." "Of course not. But Tom, this conversation revealed something important. Webb knew details about Clara's research that I've never shared publicly. He mentioned specific mineral concentrations and extraction methods that were part of our confidential work. The revelation suggested that Titan's intelligence network extended beyond local gossip to actual scientific surveillance. Clara's fears about corporate espionage had been justified. Someone had been monitoring her research and reporting to interested parties. After ending the call, Tom returned to Sandra's office with new appreciation for the legal warfare he was facing. "Sandra, we need to move fast. Titan Industries is trying to eliminate my scientific partners and isolate me legally." "What do you mean?" Tom explained Webb's contact with Dr. Vasquez and the evidence of intelligence gathering. Sandra's expression grew increasingly serious as she understood the scope of corporate manipulation. "Tom, this isn't just about buying your property. They're conducting a systematic campaign to control the entire development process. We need to establish legal protections immediately." That evening, Tom convened an emergency meeting at his house with Jake, Bill Henderson, Pete Kowalski, and Mike Chen. The partnership documents Sandra had prepared lay spread across his kitchen table like battle plans. "Gentlemen," Tom began, "this is bigger than we thought. Titan Industries isn't just trying to buy the mine, they're trying to control the entire region's mineral resources through legal manipulation and corporate espionage." He explained Webb's contact with Dr. Vasquez and the evidence of intelligence gathering. The revelation transformed the group's understanding of their situation from local business opportunity to regional economic warfare. "What do we do?" Jake asked. "We signed partnership agreements tonight," Tom said. "Legal protection that establishes community ownership and makes it impossible for Titan to force a sale." Bill Henderson studied the documents carefully. "Tom, this is a substantial commitment. We're not just investing money, we're taking on a major corporation in a fight they've been planning for months." "I know, but if we don't fight now, we'll lose everything that makes Cedar Ridge worth living in." One by one, the men signed documents that established the Cedar Ridge Mining Cooperativa legal partnership that gave local stakeholders rights and responsibilities in the mine's development. The signatures transformed Tom's individual inheritance into a community asset worth protecting. As the meeting broke up, Pete Kowalski pulled Tom aside. Tom, there's something you need to know. My wife works at the county clerk's office. She's been seeing unusual activity in property records people requesting information about mineral rights and tax assessments. What kind of people? Lawyers, mostly, but also someone claiming to represent you asking for detailed information about your financial situation and legal obligations. Tom felt the walls closing in. Webb's intelligence network included county employees who could access confidential records. The corporate campaign wasn't just about business pressure, it was about information warfare designed to give Titan Industries every possible advantage. Pete, can your wife identify who's been making these requests? She's working on it. But Tom, you need to understand that this goes beyond simple property research. Someone has been systematically gathering information about every aspect of your life. That night, Tom sat at his kitchen table surrounded by partnership documents that represented his community's commitment to fighting corporate manipulation. Sophie was asleep upstairs, trusting that her father would protect her future from forces she couldn't possibly understand. Clara's research files lay open beside the legal papers, her handwriting a reminder that some discoveries were too important to be controlled by people who valued profit over progress. The mine contained treasures that could benefit everyone, but only if local people had the courage to fight for their own future. Tom's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Reyes, community resistance will only make this more difficult for everyone. My client's patience is not unlimited." Tom deleted the message without responding, but its implications were clear. Webb's campaign was entering a new phase, one where threats would become more direct and consequences more severe. The question was whether Tom and his partners had the resources and determination to withstand corporate pressure designed to break their resolve. Outside, the mountains of Colorado stood silhouetted against the night sky, containing beneath their surface the minerals that could power America's energy future. Clara had understood that the real battle wasn't about mining technology or geological science. It was about who would control the resources that defined the next century's economic landscape. Tom turned off the lights and headed upstairs, passing Sophie's room where she slept, surrounded by mineral samples and science books. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight he felt grounded by the knowledge that some fights were worth having, regardless of the odds. The call came at 6 in the morning, jarring Tom from sleep with news that would change everything. Dr. Vasquez's voice carried excitement that made him instantly alert despite the early hour. "Tom, you need to get to my office immediately. I've found something in Clara's research files that completely changes our understanding of the mine's potential." Tom arrived at the University of Colorado's geology department an hour later, finding Dr. Vasquez surrounded by documents that covered every surface of her office. Her expression suggested she had been working through the night, driven by discoveries that demanded immediate attention. "Tom, sit down. What I'm about to show you will revolutionize everything we thought we knew about sustainable mining." She handed him a thick folder marked "Confidential, Environmental Impact Assessment" in Clara's careful handwriting. The document was dated just 3 months before Clara's death and bore official stamps from the Colorado Department of Natural Resources. Clara commissioned a comprehensive environmental study, Dr. Vasquez explained. But this isn't just about assessing potential damage, it's about proving that responsible mining could actually benefit the local ecosystem. Tom opened the folder, struggling to understand technical language that described soil composition, water table analysis, and ecological impact projections. The charts and graphs meant little to him, but Dr. Vasquez's excitement suggested they contained revolutionary information. What does this mean in practical terms? It means Clara solved the fundamental problem of extractive industries. Instead of mining that damages the environment, she developed methods that could actually improve ecosystem health while extracting valuable minerals. Dr. Vasquez pointed to specific sections of the report that detailed Clara's innovative approach. Traditional mining involved blasting and chemical processing that left behind environmental damage lasting decades. Clara's methods used selective extraction and biological processing that could restore damaged land while producing valuable resources. The key insight, Dr. Vasquez continued, is that the mine's location sits on a watershed that has been contaminated by previous mining operations. Clara's extraction methods could clean the water supply while harvesting critical minerals. Tom stared at the documents, beginning to understand the scope of Clara's vision. You're saying the mining operation could actually help the environment? More than help, it could demonstrate that resource extraction and environmental restoration are compatible goals. Clara's methods could clean up a century of mining damage while producing materials essential for renewable energy. The implications were staggering. Environmental opposition had been one of Tom's greatest concerns about developing the mine. Local environmentalists had historically opposed mining operations, viewing them as inevitably destructive to natural ecosystems. Dr. Vasquez, if this is true, why didn't Clara make it public? Because she was still refining the process, and because she understood that premature disclosure could attract attention from people who might misuse the technology. Dr. Vasquez opened another file that contained correspondence between Clara and environmental scientists from major universities. The letters revealed a network of researchers who had been collaborating on sustainable extraction methods, with Clara's mine serving as a demonstration site for revolutionary techniques. Clara wasn't just a geology professor, she was a pioneer in environmental remediation. Her mining methods could serve as a model for cleaning up contaminated sites throughout the American West. The revelation transformed Tom's understanding of the opposition he had been facing. Environmental groups hadn't been opposing his mining plans. They had been uninformed about Clara's actual methods and goals. With proper information, they could become allies rather than adversaries. There's more. Dr. Vasquez said, opening a final folder. Clara's environmental assessment includes economic projections that show sustainable mining could provide permanent employment for the entire Cedar Ridge community. The economic analysis was detailed and comprehensive, projecting job creation not just in mining operations, but in environmental restoration, equipment manufacturing, and scientific research. Clara's vision extended far beyond simple resource extraction to comprehensive community development. Dr. Vasquez, this changes everything. If mining operations could actually benefit the environment while providing sustainable employment, who would oppose it? Exactly. And that's why Titan Industries has been so aggressive in trying to acquire the property. They understand that Clara's methods could revolutionize the entire extractive industry. Tom felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. Webb's urgency wasn't about acquiring a valuable mineral deposit, it was about controlling technology that could transform environmental policy and corporate practices throughout the mining industry. What do they want to do with Clara's methods? Suppress them. Traditional mining operations generate enormous profits precisely because they externalize environmental costs. Clara's methods would force the entire industry to adopt more expensive but sustainable practices. The conversation continued for another hour, with Dr. Vasquez explaining technical details that painted a picture of corporate conspiracy extending far beyond Cedar Ridge. Titan Industries wasn't just trying to buy a mine, they were trying to prevent the development of technology that could threaten their entire business model. As Tom prepared to leave, Dr. Vasquez handed him a sealed envelope. Tom, this contains Clara's complete technical specifications for sustainable extraction. She wanted you to have this information if anything happened to her. Tom opened the envelope in his truck, reading Clara's final technical report with growing amazement. His aunt had spent her last years developing methods that could solve some of the most pressing environmental challenges facing the American West. The mine wasn't just about mineral wealth, it was about proving that human activity could heal rather than harm the natural world. The drive back to Cedar Ridge took Tom through mountain landscapes that looked different in light of Clara's discoveries. The scarred hillsides and contaminated streams that marked a century of extractive industry could potentially be healed using methods Clara had developed. The mine could become a demonstration site for environmental restoration rather than additional damage. His phone rang as he entered the town limits. Jake's voice carried unusual urgency. "Tom, you need to get to the mine immediately. Webb is there with a crew of people, and they're doing something to the property." Tom's blood ran cold. "What kind of something?" "Looks like they're conducting some kind of survey or assessment. They've got equipment, and they're taking samples without permission." Tom drove directly to the mine, finding a scene that confirmed his worst fears. 3 vehicles were parked near the mine entrance, and men in hard hats were conducting what appeared to be a geological survey. Webb stood near the mine entrance, supervising operations with the confidence of someone who believed he already owned the property. "Mr. Webb, what are you doing on my property?" Webb turned with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Reyes, good to see you. We're conducting a preliminary assessment to determine the property's actual value." "You're trespassing." "Actually, we're exercising due diligence rights under Colorado mineral law. When a property is subject to potential sale, interested parties have rights to verify assets and liabilities." Tom's legal knowledge was limited, but Webb's explanation sounded suspiciously convenient. "I haven't agreed to any sale." "Not yet. But Mr. Reyes, circumstances have a way of changing. We've discovered some interesting things about your aunt's research and the methods she was developing." The comment sent ice through Tom's veins. Webb knew about Clara's environmental assessment and sustainable extraction methods. Titan Industries wasn't just trying to buy the mine, they were trying to acquire and suppress technology that could transform the entire mining industry. "What kind of things?" "Let's just say that Clara's work was more comprehensive than anyone realized. She developed methods that could significantly impact industry practices throughout the region." Webb's tone suggested he understood the full implications of Clara's research. Titan Industries wasn't just preventing Tom from developing his property, they were preventing the implementation of technology that could force environmental responsibility throughout the extractive industry. "Mr. Webb, you need to leave my property immediately." "Of course. But Mr. Reyes, consider this. Clara's methods require significant capital investment and technical expertise to implement properly. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" The question contained an implicit threat. Webb was suggesting that Tom lacked the resources to properly develop Clara's innovations, making sale to Titan Industries the only practical option. As Webb's crew packed up their equipment, Tom realized that the stakes of his decision had multiplied exponentially. He wasn't just fighting for his family's financial security, he was fighting for the future of environmental responsibility in American mining. That evening, Tom convened an emergency meeting of the Cedar Ridge Mining Cooperative. The partners gathered in his kitchen, studying Clara's environmental assessment with growing excitement and concern. "This is incredible," Bill Henderson said, reviewing economic projections that showed sustainable mining could employ most of the town's adult population. Clara wasn't just planning to extract minerals, she was planning to rebuild the entire local economy. Jake studied technical specifications that described extraction methods he couldn't fully understand. "Tom, if this technology works, it could change everything about how we think about mining and environmental protection." "That's exactly why Titan Industries wants to control it," Tom replied. "They're not just trying to buy our mine, they're trying to prevent the development of methods that could force the entire industry to become environmentally responsible." Pete Kowalski looked up from financial projections that showed Clara's methods could generate sustainable revenue for decades. "Tom, we're not just fighting for our property anymore. We're fighting for the future of environmental policy in the American West." The meeting continued past midnight, with partners studying documents that revealed the full scope of Clara's vision. The mine could become a demonstration site for sustainable development, proving that economic growth and environmental protection were compatible goals. As the meeting broke up, Tom felt the weight of responsibility that Clara had bequeathed him. The mine contained more than valuable minerals, it contained the potential to prove that human activity could heal rather than harm the natural world. His phone buzzed with a text from Webb. "Mr. Reyes, tomorrow's conversation will determine whether this situation resolves amicably or becomes more complicated. Choose wisely." Tom deleted the message, but its implications were clear. Webb's campaign was entering its final phase, where threats would become actions and consequences would become unavoidable. The question was whether Tom and his partners had the courage to fight for a future that honored Clara's vision rather than corporate profits. The custody papers arrived by courier at 7 in the morning, delivered with the cold efficiency of legal warfare designed to break Tom's resolve. Sarah's emergency petition painted a picture of irresponsible parenting that would have been laughable if the consequences weren't so severe. According to the filing, Tom had exposed a minor child to dangerous mining activities, prioritized financial speculation over child welfare, and created an unstable environment that threatens the minor's physical and emotional well-being. The petition requested immediate temporary custody pending a full hearing, with visitation rights to be determined by the court. Tom read the document twice, his hands shaking with rage and fear. Sarah's attorney had crafted a narrative that twisted every aspect of his relationship with Sophie into evidence of negligence. Their weekend mine explorations became dangerous exposure to unstable underground structures. Sophie's scientific curiosity became inappropriate fixation on hazardous materials. Tom's financial struggles became inability to provide stable housing and basic necessities. Sophie emerged from her bedroom dressed for school, her backpack loaded with textbooks and a small mineral sample she had insisted on bringing for her science project. Her presence reminded Tom that whatever legal battles lay ahead, his primary responsibility was protecting her from adult conflicts she couldn't possibly understand. "Dad, you look worried. Is everything okay?" Tom forced a smile that felt brittle. "Just some paperwork, sweetheart. Nothing you need to worry about." "Is it about the mine? Are we in trouble?" The question revealed how perceptive Sophie had become about adult tensions. Despite Tom's efforts to shield her from the conflict with Webb and Titan Industries, she had absorbed enough information to understand that their situation was precarious. "Sophie, some people think I'm making bad choices about the mine. They're worried that keeping it isn't good for you. But keeping it is good for me. I'm learning about science and geology, and I'm helping you understand what Aunt Clara discovered." Tom knelt beside his daughter, seeing in her clear eyes the absolute faith that had sustained him through 3 years of single parenthood. "Sophie, if something happens, if you have to go stay with your mum for a while, I want you to remember that none of this is your fault." Sophie's expression grew serious. "Dad, are you giving up on the mine?" "No, sweetheart. I'm just preparing for different possibilities." "Good, because Aunt Clara left it to you for a reason, and I think she knew you were brave enough to protect it." After dropping Sophie at school, Tom drove directly to Sandra Kim's law office, finding her already reviewing the custody petition with the grim expression of someone who had seen similar tactics before. "Tom, this is aggressive, but not unexpected. Sarah's attorney is trying to create urgency that forces you to choose between fighting for Sophie and fighting for the mine." "What are my options?" "We can contest the emergency petition, but that requires proving that Sophie isn't in immediate danger. Given the community pressure and your financial situation, that could be challenging." Sandra spread legal documents across her desk, explaining procedural requirements that seemed designed to favor parents with more resources and conventional lifestyles. Tom's decision to keep the mine rather than accept Webb's buyout offer could be interpreted as prioritizing personal interests over Sophie's welfare. "Sandra, if I sold the mine tomorrow, would that strengthen my case?" "Probably, but Tom, once you sell, you lose all leverage in fighting Titan Industries. They're counting on the custody pressure to force a sale before you can organize effective resistance." The conversation revealed the sophisticated nature of the attack Tom was facing. Webb's campaign wasn't just about acquiring property, it was about applying pressure on multiple fronts to make his position untenable. "There's something else," Sandra said. "I've been investigating Titan Industries' corporate structure. They're not just a mining company, they're a subsidiary of a larger conglomerate that specializes in acquiring and controlling strategic resources. Sandra showed Tom corporate filings that revealed Titan's connections to energy companies, defense contractors, and technology firms. The mine wasn't just about minerals, it was about controlling resources essential for national security and economic competitiveness. Tom, Clara's sustainable mining methods could influence environmental policy throughout the industry. Titan Industries wants to prevent that influence by controlling the technology and preventing its implementation. The revelation transformed Tom's understanding of the stakes involved. He wasn't just fighting for his family's financial security, he was fighting for the future of environmental responsibility in American industry. His phone rang as he was leaving Sandra's office. Dr. Vasquez's voice carried excitement that cut through his legal concerns. "Tom, I've been contacted by representatives from the Department of Energy. They're interested in Clara's sustainable mining methods as a potential model for national resource development." "What kind of interest?" "The kind that comes with federal funding and regulatory support. Tom, if we can demonstrate that Clara's methods work, the government might provide resources to implement them throughout the American West." The news provided hope that had been lacking in Tom's morning. Federal support could provide the resources necessary to fight Titan Industries while developing the mine according to Clara's vision. "Dr. Vasquez, what do they need from us?" "Proof that the methods work. A demonstration project that shows sustainable mining can clean up environmental damage while extracting valuable resources." Tom felt pieces of a larger strategy forming in his mind. Instead of just resisting Titan Industries, he could demonstrate that Clara's methods offered a better alternative to traditional mining practices. How long would that take? 6 months for a preliminary demonstration. But Tom, we need to start immediately. The federal funding cycle requires proposals to be submitted within 30 days. As Tom drove back to Cedar Ridge, he realized that the custody battle and corporate pressure had created an unexpected opportunity. Instead of simply defending his right to keep the mine, he could prove that Clara's vision offered solutions to problems that extended far beyond his personal situation. That afternoon, Tom convened an emergency meeting of the Cedar Ridge Mining Cooperative. The partners gathered in his kitchen, studying federal grant requirements alongside custody documents that threatened to destroy everything they had worked toward. "Gentlemen," Tom began, "we have a choice. We can fight a defensive battle against Titan Industries, or we can go on offense by demonstrating that Clara's methods offer a better future for everyone." He explained the federal interest in sustainable mining and the possibility of government support for Clara's environmental restoration methods. The opportunity was significant, but required immediate action and substantial risk. "Tom, what about the custody situation?" Jake asked. "How can you focus on grant applications when you're fighting to keep Sophie?" "Because winning the custody battle and protecting the mine are the same fight. If we can demonstrate that Clara's methods offer sustainable employment and environmental benefits, we prove that keeping the mine serves Sophie's long-term interests." Bill Henderson studied grant requirements that demanded detailed technical proposals and financial projections. "Tom, this is a massive undertaking. We're talking about writing government proposals while fighting a major corporation and dealing with family court." "I know, but it's also our only chance to prove that Clara's vision was worth the risks we've taken." The meeting continued for hours, with partners dividing responsibilities for grant preparation, legal defense, and community outreach. The workload was overwhelming, but the alternative was surrendering to corporate pressure and abandoning Clara's legacy. As the meeting broke up, Pete Kowalski pulled Tom aside. "Tom, my wife has been monitoring county records. Titan Industries has been challenging property assessments and mineral rights throughout the valley. They're not just targeting you, they're trying to force sales from everyone who might benefit from Clara's methods." The revelation confirmed Tom's suspicions about the scope of corporate manipulation. Webb's campaign wasn't just about acquiring one minate, was about preventing the development of technology that could threaten Titan's entire business model. "Pete, how many properties are they targeting?" "At least 12. all within a 5-mile radius of your mine. Tom, they're trying to control the entire watershed that Clara identified for environmental restoration. That evening, Tom sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by federal grant applications, custody documents, and Clara's research files. The complexity of fighting on multiple fronts was overwhelming, but the alternative was unacceptable. Sophie appeared in the doorway wearing her pajamas, carrying a mineral sample that caught the kitchen light like crystallized hope. "Dad, I heard you talking to the men about grants and federal support. Does that mean people understand that Aunt Clara's work is important?" Tom smiled, pulling his daughter close. "Yes, sweetheart. Important people in the government want to learn about Aunt Clara's discoveries. Are they going to help us fight the bad people who want to take our mine?" The question revealed how much Sophie understood about their situation, despite his efforts to protect her from adult conflicts. Her use of bad people suggested she had formed her own judgments about Webb and Titan Industries. "Sophie, they're not bad people. They're just people who think differently about what's important. But yes, the government might help us prove that Aunt Clara's methods are better for everyone." "Good, because I think Aunt Clara would want her work to help people, not hurt them." As Sophie headed to bed, Tom returned to the grant applications that represented his best hope for protecting both his daughter and Clara's legacy. The federal requirements were extensive, demanding detailed technical specifications, environmental impact assessments, and economic projections that would take weeks to complete properly. His phone buzzed with a text from Webb. "Mr. Reyes, tomorrow's deadline approaches. After that, circumstances will require more direct action." Tom deleted the message, but its implications were clear. Webb's patience was ending, and Titan Industries was preparing to escalate their campaign beyond legal and financial pressure. At midnight, Tom was still working on grant applications when his phone rang with news that changed everything. Dr. Vasquez's voice carried urgency that made him instantly alert. "Tom, we have a problem. I've been contacted by someone claiming to have information about my collaboration with Clara. They're threatening to expose alleged irregularities in our research if I don't withdraw from the partnership." "What kind of irregularities?" "False claims about improper sampling procedures and fraudulent analysis. The accusations are baseless, but they could damage my reputation and invalidate our work." Tom felt the walls closing in. Webb's campaign had expanded beyond property acquisition to character assassination, designed to discredit Clara's research and isolate her scientific partners. "Dr. Vasquez, who contacted you?" "Someone claiming to represent concerned citizens who question the validity of Clara's findings. But Tom, they knew details about our work that only someone with access to confidential files could know." The revelation confirmed Tom's suspicions about corporate espionage. Titan Industries wasn't just applying external pressure, they were using inside information to attack the scientific foundation of Clara's work. "What do you want to do?" "Fight back, Tom. I've spent my career building a reputation for scientific integrity. I'm not going to let corporate thugs destroy that reputation to protect their business model." The conversation lasted another hour, with Dr. Vasquez explaining technical details that revealed the sophistication of the attack they were facing. Titan Industries wasn't just trying to buy the mine, they were trying to discredit the scientific evidence that supported sustainable mining methods. As Tom finally prepared for bed, he realized that the next day would determine whether Clara's vision survived or died with her. The federal grant deadline, the custody hearing, and Webb's ultimatum were all converging into a moment that would define the future for everyone involved. He checked on Sophie, finding her sleeping peacefully, surrounded by mineral samples and science books. Her presence reminded him that whatever battles lay ahead, he was fighting for more than property or principles. He was fighting for the right to pass on to the next generation, a world where scientific discovery and environmental responsibility were valued over corporate profits. Outside, the mountains of Colorado stood silhouetted against the night sky, containing beneath their surface the minerals that could power America's energy future. Clara had understood that the real battle wasn't about mining technology or geological science, It was about proving that human wisdom could overcome corporate greed. Tom turned off the lights and tried to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring the confrontation that would determine whether his daughter grew up in a world where discovery and responsibility were rewarded, or where corporate power silenced the voices of those who dared to imagine a better future. The emergency custody hearing was scheduled for 9 in the morning. The federal grant deadline was at noon, and Webb's ultimatum expired at close of business. 3 battles that would determine the fate of Clara's legacy and Sophie's future, all compressed into a single day that would test everything Tom had learned about courage, community, and the true meaning of wealth. As sleep finally came, Tom dreamed of Clara working in her laboratory, surrounded by mineral samples and driven by the conviction that science could heal the world's wounds. In the dream, she looked up from her work and smiled, saying words that would echo through the coming confrontation. "Tom, the real treasure isn't what you find in the ground, it's what you choose to do with it." The custody hearing began at 9 sharp in Judge Patricia Hawkins' courtroom, a wood-paneled chamber that had witnessed 40 years of family disputes and legal battles. Tom sat at the defendant's table with Sandra Kim, facing Sarah and her attorney across an aisle that felt like a chasm between 2 incompatible visions of Sophie's future. Judge Hawkins was a woman in her 60s who had earned respect for fair-minded decisions that prioritized children's welfare over parental convenience. Her expression suggested she understood the broader implications of the case before her. Sarah's attorney, David Chen, began with a presentation that painted Tom as a reckless dreamer whose obsession with the mine had created an unstable environment for Sophie. He presented evidence of Tom's financial struggles, the loss of construction contracts, and the community conflict surrounding the mine. "Your Honor," Chen argued, "Mr. Reyes has prioritized personal interests over his daughter's welfare. His decision to keep the mine rather than accept a generous buyout offer demonstrates poor judgment that directly impacts the child's stability." Tom watched Sarah during the presentation, seeing in her face the same impatience that had driven her away 3 years ago. She genuinely believed that removing Sophie from uncertainty would protect her from the consequences of Tom's choices. When Sandra Kim rose to respond, she carried with her documents that transformed the narrative from reckless gambling to scientific investigation. "Your Honor, Mr. Reyes isn't chasing fantasies. He's continuing legitimate scientific research begun by his aunt, a respected geology professor. The mine contains valuable minerals that could provide long-term security for Sophie's future." Sandra presented Clara's research files, Dr. Vasquez's professional validation, and the federal government's interest in sustainable mining methods. The evidence painted a picture of responsible stewardship rather than reckless speculation. "Furthermore," Sandra continued, "Mr. Reyes has organized community partnerships that provide both financial support and professional expertise. This isn't individual obsession, it's collaborative investigation with scientific merit." The hearing continued for 2 hours, with witnesses testifying about Tom's character and capabilities. Mrs. Henderson spoke about his dedication to Sophie and his skill as a craftsman. Jake Martinez testified about the mine's potential value and the community support for responsible development. But it was Sophie's surprise appearance that changed everything. Judge Hawkins had requested to speak with her privately, and when Sophie emerged from chambers, her 8-year-old voice carried conviction that silenced the courtroom. "Your Honor, my dad isn't putting me in danger. He's teaching me about science and helping me understand what Aunt Clara discovered. I'm learning things at the mine that I can't learn anywhere else." Judge Hawkins studied Sophie carefully. "Sophie, some people think your father should sell the mine and use the money to provide you with different opportunities. What do you think about that?" "I think the mine is more important than money. Aunt Clara found ways to help the earth get better, and my dad is going to make sure her discoveries help people. That's worth more than just being rich." The judge's expression softened as she listened to Sophie's earnest explanation. "Sophie, are you happy living with your father?" "Yes, ma'am. My dad takes care of me, and he's teaching me that some things are worth fighting for, even when other people don't understand." Judge Hawkins recessed the hearing until afternoon, but her expression suggested Sophie's testimony had been more persuasive than any legal argument. As Tom left the courthouse, his phone rang with news that Webb had been waiting for the hearing to end. Marcus Webb's voice carried the cold satisfaction of someone who believed he held winning cards. "Mr. Reyes, I trust the morning's proceedings clarified your situation. Perhaps now you're ready to discuss terms that serve everyone's interests." "What terms?" "Lunch at the Cedar Ridge Hotel, just the two of us, discussing a resolution that protects your daughter while allowing my client to develop the property responsibly." Tom agreed to the meeting, but stopped at home first to check on the federal grant application he had been preparing. The submission deadline was in 3 hours, and the application represented his best hope for gaining resources to fight corporate pressure. As he reviewed technical specifications and financial projections, Tom realized that Clara's research provided answers to questions he hadn't known to ask. Her sustainable mining methods could solve environmental problems throughout the American West, while generating economic benefits for rural communities. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Dad, I put something in your jacket pocket this morning. It's for luck." Tom checked his pocket, finding a small mineral sample wrapped in a note written in Sophie's careful handwriting. "This is from Aunt Clara's special collection. She said it would help you remember what's really important." The mineral caught the afternoon light, revealing crystalline structures that seemed to hold captured starfire. Tom pocketed the sample, feeling grounded by his daughter's faith in his judgment. The Cedar Ridge Hotel's restaurant was nearly empty when Tom arrived, finding Webb at a corner table with documents spread before him like a general planning battle strategy. Webb's expression suggested he believed the morning's custody hearing had weakened Tom's position. "Mr. Reyes, thank you for coming. I trust today's events have clarified the consequences of continued resistance. They've clarified that Sophie supports what we're doing." Webb's smile remained fixed, but somehow became less warm. Children often support their parents' choices, even when those choices aren't in their best interests. The question is whether you're prepared to risk losing her to protect property that's ultimately worthless. The property isn't worthless. Isn't it, Mr. Reyes? I've done extensive research on your aunt's work. Her findings were preliminary at best, certainly not sufficient to justify the risks you're taking. Webb opened a briefcase and withdrew documents that Tom recognized as copies of Clara's research files. The sight of confidential materials in Webb's possession confirmed the extent of corporate espionage. "How did you get those?" "Public records, mostly. Your aunt's correspondence with university researchers, her applications for geological surveys, her partnership agreements with Dr. Vasquez. All perfectly legal to obtain." Tom studied the documents, noting that Webb's copies were incomplete, missing crucial sections that described Clara's most important discoveries. Titan Industries had access to surface information, but not the deeper technical specifications that proved the mine's value. "Mr. Webb, what exactly are you proposing?" $3 million, cash payment, closing within 30 days, with a confidentiality agreement that prevents you from discussing the property's geological characteristics. The figure was 15 times Webb's original offer, suggesting that Titan Industries understood the mine's true value. The confidentiality clause revealed their real concern, preventing information about Clara's sustainable mining methods from reaching other researchers. Why the confidentiality requirement? To protect all parties from speculation and misinformation. Mining operations require careful development, and premature disclosure could create unrealistic expectations. Tom recognized the lie behind Webb's explanation. The confidentiality clause was designed to prevent others from learning about Clara's methods, ensuring that Titan Industries could develop the technology without competition or oversight. "Mr. Webb, I'm not interested in selling." Webb's expression hardened. "Mr. Reyes, you're facing custody challenges, financial difficulties, and community pressure. How long do you think you can maintain this position?" "As long as it takes." "Even if it costs you Sophie?" The question crossed lines that Tom hadn't realized existed. Webb was threatening not just financial pressure, but the destruction of his family. "Mr. Webb, this conversation is over." As Tom stood to leave, Webb played his final card. "Mr. Reyes, before you go, there's something you should know about Dr. Vasquez." Webb produced a document that made Tom's blood run colder. Federal investigation report questioning Dr. Vasquez's research methods and professional ethics. The accusations were serious enough to destroy her academic career and invalidate her partnership with Clara. "The investigation hasn't been made public yet," Webb said casually. "But academic scandals have a way of becoming public when they serve the broader community interest." Tom realized he was looking at the smoking gun that revealed Webb's true identity and methods. The document was too detailed, too specific to be coincidental. Webb had orchestrated the federal investigation as part of his campaign to discredit Clara's work. "Who are you really working for?" Webb's smile became predatory. "I work for people who understand that some discoveries are too important to be left to amateurs." Tom pocketed the federal investigation report, realizing that Webb had just provided evidence of the conspiracy he had been fighting. The document contained information that could expose Titan Industries' methods and protect Dr. Vasquez from false accusations. As he left the restaurant, Tom's phone was buzzing with messages from Sandra Kim about the afternoon custody hearing. But more importantly, he had in his pocket evidence that could change everything, proof that Webb's campaign was based on manufactured evidence and criminal conspiracy. The federal grant deadline was in 2 hours. The custody hearing resumed in 90 minutes, and Tom finally had the evidence he needed to fight back. The question was whether he could move fast enough to use it before Webb realized what he had revealed. Tom burst into Sandra Kim's office with Webb's federal investigation report clutched in his hand, his mind racing through implications that could change everything. Sandra looked up from custody hearing preparations, immediately recognizing the urgency in his expression. "Sandra, Webb just gave me evidence of a federal conspiracy. He's been orchestrating fake investigations to discredit Clara's research and force the sale." Sandra examined the document, her expression growing increasingly serious as she understood what she was reading. "Tom, this is huge. If Webb provided this as leverage, he's essentially confessed to manipulating federal agencies. Can we use it in the custody hearing? More than that, we can use it to expose the entire corporate conspiracy. Tom, this document proves that Sarah's custody challenge is part of a coordinated campaign to force the sale." Sandra's fingers flew across her keyboard as she researched the federal investigation's background. Within minutes, she had identified irregularities in the filing that suggested outside manipulation. "Tom, look at this." The investigation was initiated by an anonymous complaint that referenced specific technical details from Clara's confidential research. Someone with inside access provided information to federal authorities. The revelation confirmed Tom's suspicions about the scope of corporate espionage. Webb wasn't just applying external pressure, he was using government agencies as weapons against people who threatened corporate interests. "Sandra, how do we prove this?" "We don't have to prove it. Webb just confessed. By showing you this document and threatening to make it public, he admitted to orchestrating the investigation." Sandra's phone rang with an incoming call from Dr. Vasquez, whose voice carried excitement that cut through the afternoon's tension. "Sandra, is Tom there? I have news that changes everything." Dr. Vasquez explained that she had been contacted by FBI agents investigating corporate manipulation of federal agencies. The investigation had been triggered by irregularities in the complaint against her, research irregularities that suggested outside interference. "The FBI is looking at Titan Industries' methods throughout the region. Tom, if you have evidence of Webb's activities, they want to see it immediately." Tom looked at Sandra, realizing that Webb's overconfidence had provided exactly the evidence federal investigators needed. By threatening to expose a fraudulent investigation, Webb had confessed to orchestrating it. "Dr. Vasquez, we have evidence." Webb just provided documentation of his entire conspiracy. The next hour passed in a blur of phone calls and document preparation. Sandra contacted federal investigators while Tom submitted his grant application with minutes to spare. The federal funding opportunity suddenly seemed less important than the criminal investigation that could expose corporate corruption throughout the mining industry. At 3 o'clock, the custody hearing resumed with Judge Hawkins presiding over a courtroom that had filled with unexpected observers. Tom noticed several men in business suits who hadn't been present during the morning session, their presence suggesting official interest in the proceedings. Sandra rose to address the court with documents that transformed the hearing from family dispute to criminal conspiracy exposure. Your Honor, new evidence has emerged that reveals Ms. Reyes' custody petition is part of a coordinated corporate campaign to force the sale of valuable mineral rights. She presented Webb's federal investigation report alongside documentation of Titan Industries' systematic pressure throughout the region. The evidence painted a picture of corporate manipulation that extended far beyond one family's custody dispute. Furthermore, Sandra continued, federal authorities are now investigating Titan Industries for using fraudulent complaints to manipulate government agencies. The timing of this custody challenge is not coincidental, it's part of a criminal conspiracy. Judge Hawkins studied the evidence with the careful attention of someone who understood the broader implications. Her expression suggested she was shocked by the scope of corporate manipulation revealed in the documents. Sarah's attorney, David Chen, rose to object, but his protest lacked conviction. The evidence was overwhelming, and his client's timing suddenly appeared suspicious rather than protective. Your Honor, Chen said weakly, Ms. Reyes' concerns about her daughter's welfare are genuine, regardless of any corporate activities. Judge Hawkins turned to Sarah directly. Ms. Reyes, were you contacted by anyone regarding the timing of this custody petition? Sarah's hesitation answered the question before she spoke. I may have received some information about Tom's financial situation from concerned community members. What kind of concerned community members? People who thought Sophie would be better off in a more stable environment. Sandra stood to present additional evidence that revealed the connection between Sarah's concerned community members and Titan Industries' intelligence network. The documentation showed that Sarah had been provided with detailed information about Tom's finances and legal vulnerabilities. Your Honor, Ms. Reyes was manipulated by corporate agents who provided her with information designed to trigger this custody challenge. She's as much a victim of this conspiracy as Mr. Reyes. The courtroom erupted in whispers as observers realized they were witnessing the exposure of a criminal conspiracy that extended far beyond Cedar Ridge. Judge Hawkins called for order, but her expression suggested she was processing implications that would influence her decision. At that moment, the courtroom doors opened to admit Marcus Webb, flanked by two men in FBI windbreakers. Webb's confident demeanor had vanished, replaced by the expression of someone who realized his carefully constructed campaign was collapsing. Mr. Webb, Judge Hawkins said dryly, how convenient of you to join us. FBI Special Agent Maria Santos approached the bench with documents that formalized the federal investigation into Titan Industries' activities. Her presence transformed the custody hearing into a criminal proceeding. Your Honor, we have a federal warrant for Mr. Webb's arrest on charges of conspiracy to defraud the United States government. We also have evidence that this custody proceeding was initiated as part of that conspiracy. Webb's arrest in the courtroom provided dramatic confirmation of everything Sandra had argued. Sarah sat in stunned silence, apparently realizing for the first time that she had been manipulated by corporate agents who viewed her daughter as leverage in a business dispute. Judge Hawkins recessed the hearing for 30 minutes while federal agents processed Webb's arrest and Sarah processed the revelation that her custody challenge had been orchestrated by criminals. When the hearing resumed, Sarah's attorney had withdrawn the emergency petition, and Sarah herself requested to address the court. Your Honor, I want to apologize to Tom and to Sophie. I thought I was protecting my daughter, but I realize now that I was being used by people who don't care about her welfare. Judge Hawkins looked at Tom, who was still processing the rapid transformation of his situation. Mr. Reyes, do you have any comment on this development? Tom stood, feeling the weight of vindication and the responsibility that came with victory. "Your Honor, I just want to continue raising my daughter with the support of our community. Sophie belongs in Cedar Ridge, learning about science and following her curiosity wherever it leads." Judge Hawkins dismissed the custody petition with a ruling that praised Tom's dedication to Sophie and condemned the corporate manipulation that had threatened their family. As the courtroom cleared, Tom found himself surrounded by community members who had come to support him. Mrs. Henderson, Jake Martinez, Bill Henderson, and the other partners of the Cedar Ridge Mining Cooperative stood with him in a show of solidarity that proved Clara's vision was shared by the entire community. Outside the courthouse, FBI agents were leading Webb away in handcuffs, while Tom's phone rang with congratulations from Dr. Vasquez. "Tom, the federal grant has been approved. The Department of Energy wants to fund a full demonstration of Clara's sustainable mining methods." The news completed Tom's transformation from struggling handyman to leader of a project that could influence environmental policy throughout the American West. Clara's vision was becoming reality, supported by federal resources and community commitment. As Tom drove home through streets that looked the same but felt different, he realized that the real victory wasn't defeating corporate conspiracy or winning custody battlesit, was proving that ordinary people could protect extraordinary discoveries when they found the courage to stand together. Sophie was waiting at home, her backpack loaded with textbooks and mineral samples, ready to continue the work that Clara had begun. Her presence reminded Tom that the most valuable inheritance wasn't money or property, it was the responsibility to pass on to the next generation a world where scientific discovery and environmental responsibility were valued over corporate profits. The mine contained treasures worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but the real wealth lay in the community that had formed around Clara's vision and the future that Sophie's generation would inherit. Tom had won more than a legal battle. He had won the right to prove that some discoveries were too important to be controlled by people who measured value only in quarterly profits. As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, Tom felt Clara's presence in the growing darkness, her spirit vindicated by the courage of ordinary people who had chosen to fight for something larger than themselves. The mine would become a demonstration site for sustainable development, but more importantly, it would become proof that scientific discovery and community cooperation could overcome even the most sophisticated corporate manipulation. The battle was over, but the real work, honoring Clara's legacy and building the future she had envisioned, was just beginning. 6 months after Webb's arrest, Tom stood at the entrance to what had once been called Crazy Clara's Hole in the Ground, watching federal inspectors document the success of the first sustainable mining demonstration project in American history. The mine had been transformed from an abandoned eyesore into a showcase of environmental restoration and community development. Dr. Vasquez approached with a clipboard full of technical data, her expression radiating the satisfaction of someone whose life's work had been vindicated. Behind her, teams of researchers from universities across the country were studying extraction methods that could revolutionize the mining industry. "Tom, the final environmental assessment is extraordinary. The watershed contamination has been reduced by 60%, and the mineral extraction is exceeding all projections." Tom studied the reports that documented Clara's vision becoming reality. The mine was producing critical minerals worth millions, while simultaneously healing environmental damage that had plagued the region for decades. More importantly, the demonstration project had attracted national attention and federal funding that would expand sustainable mining throughout the American West. "Dr. Vasquez, Clara would be proud of what we've accomplished." "She would be proud of what you've accomplished. Tom, Clara had the vision, but you had the courage to make it real." The conversation was interrupted by Sophie's voice calling from the mine entrance. At 9 years old, she had become the unofficial ambassador for the project, leading tours for visiting scientists and government officials with enthusiasm that reminded everyone why Clara had believed in the power of curiosity. "Dad, The people from the Department of Energy want to see the new extraction chamber, and Mrs. Henderson brought cookies for the research team. Tom smiled at his daughter's easy familiarity with federal officials and university researchers. The mine had become her playground and classroom, a place where scientific discovery and environmental responsibility were part of daily life. As they walked through tunnels that had been transformed from dangerous passages into state-of-the-art research facilities, Tom reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. The struggling handyman had become the director of a federally funded demonstration project that employed 37 people and generated enough revenue to support the entire Cedar Ridge community. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. The first few months had required 18-hour days and constant problem-solving as they implemented Clara's methods on a commercial scale. But the Cedar Ridge Mining Cooperative had provided the human resources and local knowledge necessary to overcome every obstacle. Jake Martinez had become the project's chief engineer, his mechanical expertise essential for maintaining the specialized equipment Clara had designed. Bill Henderson managed construction of the new facilities, his experience in project management invaluable for coordinating federal requirements with local needs. Pete Kowalski handled supply logistics, while Mike Chen oversaw the heavy machinery operations that extracted minerals with unprecedented environmental care. The community partnership had proven as valuable as Clara's technical innovations. Local knowledge of weather patterns, geological conditions, and environmental sensitivities had been essential for successful implementation. The mine had become a model for community-based resource development that benefited everyone rather than just distant shareholders. Mrs. Henderson appeared with a tray of cookies and the warm smile that had sustained Tom through his darkest moments. At 74, she had become the project's unofficial historian, documenting the transformation of Cedar Ridge from a struggling mountain town into a center for sustainable development. Tom, dear, I have wonderful news. The elementary school has received a grant to establish a geology and environmental science program. Sophie will be the first student to benefit from educational opportunities that didn't exist when you were her age. The news completed a circle that had begun with Clara's vision of community development. The mine wasn't just producing valuable minerals, it was creating educational opportunities that would benefit generations of Cedar Ridge children. As the afternoon wound down, Tom found himself in Clara's old study, now converted into a memorial library that housed her research alongside ongoing scientific investigations. The walls were covered with photographs, documenting the mine's transformation, but Tom's attention was drawn to a framed letter that had arrived that morning. The letter was from Sarah, written from Denver, where she had returned to her software career with a new understanding of what really mattered. Her words carried the humility of someone who had learned difficult lessons about the difference between security and stability. Tom, I want you to know how proud I am of what you've accomplished. Sophie calls me every week to talk about her science projects and the amazing things she's learning at the mine. I realize now that you were giving her something I never could, the chance to be part of something larger than herself. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that real security comes from being part of a community that values courage over comfort. Tom folded the letter carefully, feeling grateful for Sarah's recognition, but more importantly for the healing that had taken place within their family. Sophie's relationship with her mother had improved once the corporate manipulation was exposed, and the custody battle had been replaced by cooperative parenting that served everyone's interests. As evening approached, Tom walked through the mine's surface facilities, noting the subtle changes that marked the transition from industrial extraction to environmental restoration. Native plants had been reintroduced to areas previously scarred by mining, and the water treatment systems were producing cleaner runoff than the natural streams had carried in decades. The economic impact extended far beyond the mine itself. Cedar Ridge's main street bustled with activity as researchers, government officials, and journalists visited to study the demonstration project. The hotel was booked months in advance. Restaurants had expanded their menus to accommodate diverse dietary needs, and Pete Kowalski's hardware store had become a supplier for specialized scientific equipment. But the most significant change was intangible: the transformation of community pride and self-confidence. Cedar Ridge had become a place where people stayed rather than left, where young families moved to be part of something innovative and important. The mine had provided more than employment; it had given the community a sense of purpose and national significance. As Tom locked up the mine offices and prepared to head home, he found Sophie waiting by the entrance with her backpack full of mineral samples and notebooks filled with observations about the day's activities. "Dad, Dr. Vasquez says the next phase of extraction will reach the deepest mineral veins, the ones Aunt Clara marked with the most stars." Tom smiled at his daughter's excitement, remembering his own bewilderment at Clara's cryptic notations. "What do you think we'll find down there?" "I think we'll find exactly what Aunt Clara knew was there: enough minerals to power clean energy for the whole country." The confidence in Sophie's voice reminded Tom of Clara's unwavering belief in the mine's potential. His daughter had inherited not just scientific curiosity, but also the faith that guided all great discoveries, the belief that understanding the natural world could solve humanity's most pressing challenges. As they walked home through streets that buzzed with purposeful activity, Tom reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The mine had provided financial security and professional success, but more importantly, it had proven that ordinary people could protect extraordinary discoveries when they found the courage to stand together. The house that had once felt precarious now felt like the foundation for a future that honored Clara's vision while serving Sophie's generation. The mortgage was paid, Sophie's college fund was secure, and the community that had once whispered about Tom's judgment now looked to him for leadership in sustainable development. But the real treasure wasn't measured in dollars or professional recognition. It was the knowledge that Clara's legacy would continue through Sophie's generation and beyond. The mine had become a demonstration that scientific discovery and environmental responsibility could create prosperity that benefited everyone rather than just a privileged few. As Tom tucked Sophie into bed, surrounded by mineral samples and science books that reflected her expanding understanding of the natural world, he felt Clara's presence in the growing darkness. His aunt's spirit had been vindicated not just by the mine's success, but by the community that had formed around her vision. "Dad," Sophie said sleepily, "do you think Aunt Clara knew this would happen?" Tom considered the question, remembering Clara's careful planning and her faith in his ability to honor her legacy. "I think she knew that if we had the courage to follow her vision, we could create something important." "Good, because I want to be a scientist like her when I grow up. I want to find ways to help the Earth get better." Tom kissed his daughter's forehead, feeling the continuity that connected Clara's discoveries to Sophie's future. The mine contained treasures worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but the real wealth lay in the knowledge that scientific curiosity and community cooperation could overcome even the most sophisticated corporate manipulation. Outside, the mountains of Colorado stood silhouetted against the star-filled sky, their peaks containing beneath the surface the minerals that would power America's energy future. Clara had understood that the real battle wasn't about mining technology or geological science. It was about proving that human wisdom and environmental stewardship could create prosperity that honored both the Earth and the people who called it home. The mine had provided more than financial security. It had become proof that some discoveries were too important to be controlled by people who measured value only in quarterly profits. Clara's vision had become reality, supported by federal resources and community commitment, creating a model for sustainable development that would influence environmental policy for generations to come. As Tom turned off the lights and prepared for sleep, he felt the quiet satisfaction of someone who had honored a sacred trust. The mine would continue operating, the community would continue growing, and Sophie would continue learning about the natural world that Clara had spent her life trying to understand and protect. The real treasure had never been the minerals in the ground. It was the chance to prove that ordinary people could create extraordinary change when they found the courage to follow their convictions. Clara's legacy was secure, Sophie's future was bright, and the community that had once dismissed their dreams now celebrated their success. The battle was over, but the real work building, a future that honored scientific discovery and environmental responsibility, would continue for generations to come. And in that continuity, Tom found the peace that comes from knowing that some fights are worth having, regardless of the odds, because they create a world worthy of our children's dreams.